Ukrainian victory, Sera victory, might not necessarily consist in World War II type in a complete destruction of Russian forces through a sequence of operations, but it might result in cumulative effect of continuous attrition rate.
Ця війна, вона перетече безпосередньо на території Російської Федерації і буде внутрішньою війною.
The boomerang effect of this operation made Ukraine at the center of the Western system.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. I'm your host, Maria Romanenko. We hear that Ukraine is winning all the time. But how exactly is it winning, and when will there be a full withdrawal of Russian forces? Today we will talk about Ukraine's victory plan. So if you want to find out, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. In today's program, two Ukrainian analysts will present their versions of the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war, while an Italian war correspondent will compare what he's seen in Iraq and Afghanistan to what he's seen in Ukraine today. First, let's hear from Mykola Bielieskov, research fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies.
When we are talking about hypothetical scenarios how this war might end, the so-called theory of victory, it depends on the framework one is using to assess the situation. A lot of people are assessing the situation and making predictions based on how World War II ended, namely that the Allies were successful in eliminating Nazi and Japanese forces in a consequence of offensive operations. That's why a lot of people are criticizing our allies, given maybe the lack of the heavy weaponry supplies. But the other theory of victory, it implies not complete destruction of the enemy in the sequence of the operation, but a cumulative effect of continuous attrition rate, continuous fighting on the front, and also troubling actions by long-range fires, in-depth strikes in the rear, and general demoralization given deficiencies of the Russian war machines, first and foremost its logistics. So Ukrainian victory, Sera victory, might not necessarily consist in World War II type in a complete destruction of Russian forces through a sequence of operations, but it might result in cumulative effect of continuous attrition rate. And for this, our allies, Western allies, they continue to do supplies despite Russian nuclear blackmail, and it's very symbolic and important fact that US is continue to ship to Ukraine priority munitions like Gimblers, like anti-radiation missiles, like Excalibur munitions, like remote anti-armor mining systems that allow Ukraine both in defense and offense treat Russian forces and bring them to the point of complete demoralization that would result in some cessation of hostilities favoring Ukraine.
Lorenzo Cremonesi is a special envoy from Corriere della Sera, one of Italy's biggest newspapers. He has outlined why Ukraine is already winning based on his observations of the war so far.
I arrived here on the night between the 24th and the 25th of February, so at the beginning. So I stayed in Kiev for a month and a half, and let me say that since then I've been all the time, except for about a month of being in Italy, here. But I've been always on the front, so I never came back. And let me know, I arrive here now because of the new wave of Russian attacks on the capital. And my first impression is that looking at Kiev, you won the war. Why? Because when I left, when I was here, this city was empty. More than half of the population, 4 million, 2 million left. Here, in front of this square, there were barricades. There were people with Molotov cocktails. Military were stopping you if you had a camera in your hands because they would say that you were a spy, a collaborator. So the city now is alive. Yesterday, you can ask Sergei to my fixer here. I was so happy to see this city because the city was worried, was not dead, but really worried with the idea that the Russians could have entered in any moment. No, the city now is on its own feet. It's true there are problems of energy, of whatever, but nothing to compare for what I saw. I've been a war correspondent for 40 years, so every war, you can talk about the Gulf War, the American in Iraq, Afghanistan, you name it, has different phases. So this war at the beginning, a phase where, in spite of what all the propaganda from Moscow and Putin was saying, Putin attacked and Putin wanted the country. And what was the idea? To capture Kiev. That's clear. We saw it. So I tell you, for me, at the end of the first week, I would say about the 1st of March, was clear at the time that that kind of war was lost for the Russians. The idea was to come here quickly, kill Zelensky, capture Zelensky, destroy the government, put a puppet government in Ukraine, and this war in the ideas, in the original plan of Putin, should have been very short, very quick, like a Blitzkrieg, as the German used to say. This didn't work. And then all the famous story of the big convoy who never arrived here, the Russians clearly were not organized. The Russians, from that moment, were always trying to cope with the situation. They lost the initiative. That was the first phase. That was clear. The Russians had to follow the event. They were not dictating the event. They were following the situation because they didn't succeed in doing what they were planning. So then the second phase started, and it was difficult for Ukraine because then there was a new kind of war, which was not a blitzkrieg war, was not a quick war, agile war, quick war. It was classic Russian style. Artillery, tanks, large number of men, advancing slowly, not quick operation, but slowly. And that on that terrain, the Ukrainians were not ready in terms of men, of weapons, of ammunition, of technique. They were not ready. And so at that time, I would say that the more difficult moment for Ukraine was in May, and the time of the defeat of Mariupol, Azovstal, all the stuff. There was a very low morale, and I said, situation was really getting bad. But then something happened. While the Ukrainians were basically alone, apart the American intelligence, which was very important, the intelligence, but they were basically alone with the weapon they had from the Soviet Union time. Then American weapons, British, I would say, the rest, French, German, Italian, were, peanuts, were not so important. The real center, the real big element were the Americans. And we saw it, because I would say that already in June, it was clear to me at least, that the big offensive in the east, that was a big area, was slowing down. Of course, in the meantime, we went to Kharkiv, there were these little, but clearly the Russians, they were not able to have more front. Kharkiv, they lost it, because they were concentrating in the Donbass. And that we saw it. But we're still advancing, but slowing down. They arrived in front of Bakhmut already. They're fighting now in Bakhmut. They were already in Bakhmut we were talking about Bakhmut in July. We went to Bakhmut, and we were there now. And there, clearly, through, thanks to the American weapons, the new high-precise, high-Mars missile launchers, all these new technologies that American gave, but also think about that. Were enough. There are relatively few new generation weapons in the hand of the Ukrainian with good trained people. Also, there was needed the time to train the soldiers. The situation was clearly changing. Who is winning the war? Russia is a big country. Clearly, Putin is aiming at time. He wants to prolong the war. And the economy of Ukraine is smaller than the Russian one. There are problems of, energy, etc. And now Putin, with the new chief of staff that he's using here, is really aiming to attack the morale, the civil society, the standard of living, electricity, heating system, roads, whatever. It was already there. There is nothing new in what they're doing, but it's doing more massively in a more systematic way. Winter is coming also. It will be a difficult, very difficult winter. But if you ask me from a military point of view, Russia is having a lot of trouble. Definitely the original plan to annex Russia, to annex Ukraine by Russia is not working. And there is something more which changed dramatically. At the beginning was the idea that Ukraine can kind of make a peace and be a neutral country. You know, be in the middle between. Now, I'm not saying that Ukraine is entering in NATO, but definitely Ukraine is becoming the center of the European defense. I mean, to speak about a neutral Ukraine, as was told till the 23rd of February today, is utopic. It's impossible. Doesn't work. Ukraine is standing today at the center of the European Western military and civil system. And that was done not by Ukraine, by Putin. The boomerang effect of this operation made Ukraine at the center of the Western system.
A different view is presented by a political expert, lawyer, and the director of the Institute of National Policy, Yuriy Shulipa. He thinks that the only way Russia can be fully defeated is by a subsequent internal war in the country.
Але оскільки Росія – це імперія, а ці республіки, національні республіки, які наразі входять до складу Російської Федерації, вони фактично колонізовані. І тому цю війну, яка буде потім відбуватися на території Російської Федерації, її треба називати війною внутрішньою. Так ось, після ліквідації 200 тисяч російсько-фашистських загарбників, похибка в моєму прогнозі, я вже про це казав, але ще я нагадаю, плюс-мінус 5 тисяч. Ця війна, вона перетече безпосередньо на територію Російської Федерації і буде внутрішньою війною. І акторами цієї війни будуть саме ті, хто зараз веде війну проти України. Тобто Пригожин, він буде, який володіє, хоча вона іменується як приватна військова компанія «Вагнер», але насправді це державна військова організація. Тому, що я хочу нагадати нашим зрителям і слухачам, у Російській Федерації існує кримінальна відповідальність за найомничество. Ось. І саме без дозволу держави така організація, вона взагалі не може існувати. І ми бачимо, що Пригожин їздить по тюрмам, російська пропаганда, вона сприяє діяльності військової кампанії Пригожина. Насправді це кампанія державна. Пригожин фактично в ній грає роль як, скажімо так, менеджера. Ось. Тобто люди Пригожина будуть воювати з іншими силовиками, відбудеться розкол ФСБ. Я, до речі, хочу сказати, що ФСБ – це не така уж наразі, як виглядає монолітна структура. Там, як мінімум, є 4 центри впливу. Також і серед різних військових угрупувань будуть внутрі Росії збройні конфлікти, бо вони ж, скажімо так, самі заложили основу для майбутньої внутрішньої війни, створюючи так звані національні загони, які будуть воювати проти України за національними ознаками. І оце майбутні армії для внутрішньої російської війни.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In our pinned comment, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please subscribe to our channel, like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!